After 30 years of witnessing what it takes to heal trauma, who heals and who gets worse, I can't stay silent any longer, because what's being sold as healing in certain kinds of therapy today, and especially in trauma therapy, is not healing. It's paralysis. I spent years sitting in rooms where I was told to keep talking about what happened and to go deeper into the pain, to name every feeling, every wound, and to focus on self with a capital S. And I was told that meant I was brave. And I was told that was the work and I was making progress. And when I questioned that, I was assured that this is going to take a long time. That's what's going on. And it was normal for things to get a lot worse before they got better. But after 11 therapists and many years, I wasn't getting better. I was falling apart. And I'm not the only one. When I say therapy nearly destroyed me, I'm not exaggerating. What I'm calling out is the blind faith, the monopoly that therapy has on what is officially recognized as getting help. It's enshrined the idea that professional therapy is the only legitimate way to heal trauma, and all therapy is good. It's just good, and everything outside of it is not legit, and that if you're hurting and therapy isn't helping, the problem must be you. So that idea is wrong. I'm here to tell you, and I'm living proof. Nowadays, so much more is known about how to help people who have lived through trauma. And thank God, there are now therapists who understand about dysregulation, and they can help you with that instead of just pushing you into telling your story again and again, and then believing that all the crying and the panic and shaking and mental chaos that this puts you into is progress somehow. Yeah, you're processing a lot, they used to say. So perhaps this is what it looks like from the outside, that we're processing. But inside, dysregulation blocks processing from happening. The repeated triggering reinforces your reactivity. It strengthens your trigger mechanism and your responses. That keep every adrenaline-loaded memory looping and looping and never transforming into an emotionally neutral memory. That's what processing is. You know, you're very charged, you're getting a lot of adrenaline and cortisol. When you think about something, your heart pounds. When it's processed, and how to do that is, in some ways a great mystery, but what everybody here is, in the trauma space is trying to help you do, processing it into a mere memory, not charged, not activating your whole nervous system. So what happens from the repetition, though, from the old school talk therapy is it can make you very hypersensitive from all that retriggering, because talking, in fact, there's a brain pathway when you're talking about traumatic experiences. I'm terrible at it. I was just talking to a friend yesterday who knows a little bit about my work, but didn't totally know about dysregulation. And I needed to say a little vividly about something bad that had happened. And in the course of that, I could not feel my hands. It was a friend, that's not therapy's fault. It's just like, I can't talk about trauma without getting so dysregulated that I can't remember very well. I get very thrown off by it. Well, it turns out this is maybe about 30% of people who had childhood trauma. It's super normal. But when I was doing a lot of therapy, they didn't know that anybody was dysregulated, and they didn't know that talking about it was not the universal fix for it. So you become hypersensitive from the talking, and then ordinary triggers can wreck your composure. Your thinking gets darker, and God forbid you get validated on those trauma-driven thoughts and beliefs about yourself, like, oh yes, you really are a victim, and yes, all your problems really are caused by society and your parents and men and whatever it is. You know what's helpful? Is acknowledging that, yeah, the world has given you a bad hand in some ways, but there are things you can control. And if I were queen of the world, I would say first re-regulation, then begin to look at some things that you can control. Because if you can get one little win, if you can bring a little bit of uplift or comfort or confidence to yourself by working on one thing that you can control, which is never other people and never the past, when you get those little wins, it strengthens you to do a second wind. I'm a big believer in that. Like, start with the things that are easy to succeed at. I know that when I was deep in my complex PTSD symptoms and struggling, really drowning in my symptoms, not knowing how I was going to get through it, I was very self-centered. I'm sure people regarded me as being, narcissistic in my behavior, in just that I was fairly insensitive to other people and their needs and how my words would affect them. I was very focused on myself. I talked about it a lot. Once I knew how to regulate my nervous system, that receded, and I was able to turn my focus more generally to both myself and other people, to have attunement to the outside world. And I'm telling you, when you've lived with trauma, attunement to the outside world has been very, very badly damaged. It's probably something like, if you're in trauma right now, you may not even know it's a thing, but it's a thing, and it's available to you when you start to calm the dysregulation. And as much as anything traumatic that happened to you as a child was by definition not your fault, it's you who has to make a transformation right now. And part of what that's going to involve is bringing the locus of your focus back in to things that you can control. When you're looking at problems, look for things. What are things that I'm doing? This is super exciting when you're healing, actually, because when it's something you're doing, it's almost a slam dunk that you'll be able to fix it. Maybe not right away. Like I used to be a very heavy smoker. And after I decided I didn't want to be a smoker, it took me about 3 years to permanently not be a smoker. But the decision was the turning point. If you think nothing is ever your fault, there's this very dark side of that, which means then nothing is under your control. I think we can all see that there are so many people struggling to escape this artificially induced state of reactivity and blame, where they perceive themselves as having no choice. This is a very disempowered place, even though a lot of times I think we get encouraged to think that way because the friend or the therapist who's trying to help us is so worried that if we had one more thing to feel bad about, it would break us. We want to take on reality. We want to find out, like, where am I falling into the trap again? Where are the decisions that I've made that have just gotten me into a total painful situation? What red flag didn't I see? What boundary did I not understand? Trauma can leave you numbed from your instinctive sense of right and wrong. And when the culture reinforces that there's no difference, that it's subjective, that's a trauma too. It sort of is a vicious circle. The greatest good that can happen for you is to find what you're really meant for, what you're meant to bring to this world for the benefit of the world. Trauma may have delayed you, but trauma can be overcome very quickly if you have the right tools. Now, sadly, so much trauma treatment, back to my point of the thing I can't stay silent about anymore, pulls people off that course, brings them back into self, back into the sad story. The story is sad. I don't deny it needs to be talked about, and that's important. But it is not in itself the destination or the solution. I think that's what it looks like to experts from the outside, is that we just don't get something. And so they'll say things to us like, you just have to choose differently, your partners, or you have to stop trying to repeat your childhood, or you just need to love yourself. All of that stuff. Those are nice ideas, but they're easier said than done. They are the things that can be taken for granted, like a fish takes water for granted, by people who were parented properly. And when that didn't happen, like loving yourself, it's not just like you go, oh, right, I almost forgot to love myself. Like, it's not there. It's not there. And it is something that you end up learning. And I've made a lot of videos about this before. For me, how I ended up loving myself is by doing things that were lovable and esteemable and loving other people. Like, it sort of went backwards for me. I didn't operate under this idea, this platitude, like you have to love yourself before you can love somebody else. I could tell you categorically, that's just not true. That's just mathematically not the fact. You can love other people a great deal before you love yourself. But loving other people does tend to lead to an expansion of your heart that does let you love yourself. But it's got to involve the change of the behaviors that have got you so against yourself. And this is what I could never get help in therapy, was I really had a lot of self-defeating behaviors. I was self-sabotaging, and I was fragile. And I think the therapists were always scared I would break when I said, you know what, but I think I'm doing this to myself. It was something along the lines of, no, look at everything that was done to you. So they were trying to make a softer landing for me, but in the end, it didn't let me get to the truth. And the truth was, I have self-defeating behaviors. I can't really figure out my mom or change what happened, but I could change my tendency to, exaggerate or flirt with my friends' boyfriends or things. I could change that. And I might find I have better relationships. And if I have that, then my life would get happier. And then, these other good outcomes would come. Consider a different order to your healing that begins with virtue, with just straight up doing the right thing, with moral right and wrong and choosing the right thing. So my family wasn't without values, but I did grow up in moral chaos. So sadly, so much trauma treatment pulls people off the course of trying to get moral clarity about things. And, this is not that subjective. I think that my parents' generation wanted to believe it was subjective, and there's maybe some people nowadays who still want to believe that morality is bullshit and there is no right and wrong. And like, if everybody communicates really well, who cares who you sleep with? And I don't agree. I think if you grew up in moral chaos, part of your healing is to start to track, like, well, wait a second. Because what's moral is what serves you and what serves other people. And sometimes we have to give up what would be convenient or fun or sweet or romantic or something. We have to give it up in order to stick to the choice and the outcome that is good for the kids, that's good for, the family, that's good for the financial future, that's good for your soul, that's not going to leave you with a bunch of guilt and estrangement from the people who counted on you. Because that's what my mom's generation did. I think trauma treatment, by focusing so much on what happened, it can encourage getting stuck in identity, like, oh, I'm the abandoned kid. And if you stay in identity, what it's costing you is being more sort of centered in vision. Where are you trying to go? Not like, what's the bad thing that happened, but what's the good thing you're trying to go toward? I'm not saying you should deny the bad thing that happened. It's there, but it's a memory. It's a fact. It doesn't need to come up every day. It's not who you are. It's what happened. And who you are is somebody who's got a vision, and that's where you're going. So you get stuck in identity rather than vision. You get stuck in pain rather than a purpose. Now, people who are alone and medicated and inflamed with anger and blaming people and posting about it and raging in public and waiting for somewhere else to fix the world and getting validated that this is progress, it's an easy hole to fall into. I should know. I've spent quite a bit of time in that hole. And I could have told you 100 ways that my mother was a shitty mom, but I was totally unclear, like, why was I losing so many friendships? Why was I falling further into depression and panic all the time? Well, the answer was, it was me. I was doing that. I didn't know how to get out. I didn't know that I was responsible. I was very focused on things that had happened to me that were unchanging because they were past facts. But the longer I stayed in therapy, the further I got from empowerment and freedom to go look at the truth and go, okay, well, I see some things I'm doing that are kind of dysfunctional. And I bet like one by one, I could make a difference on those. That is what my healing ended up sounding like when it happened. Hundreds of therapists and doctors tell me, by the way, quietly, that they know exactly what I'm talking about here. They don't like it either. They don't dare say it publicly that some therapists buy so deeply into a modality of treatment that common sense gets lost and there's no mechanism to catch this or call it out. I mean, no one's really measuring, like, where do the good results happen? Like, rarely are there studies. And sadly, like so many things in science and medicine and research, results can be cherry-picked. They use only studies that show a favorable result. They don't even count the 35% of participants in the study who dropped out, presumably because nothing good was happening. You don't really know. And if you call it out and say intuitively, I'm a therapist and I'm just noticing a lot of people do better if they do this and they don't do so well if they do that, that goes against orthodoxy to imply that the way that trauma is treated has any failings at all. But here's the thing, the evidence does not point to a clear pattern of efficacy for any one therapeutic modality over another. Trauma from childhood is notoriously difficult to treat. A lot of things that work for acute adult traumas, like EMDR, it was great for my adult traumas. It didn't touch my childhood trauma. I think that's not 100% the case, but some things do things, some things don't. So to say this out loud and to mention the casualties that some people poured their money and their hopes and their life into something that was really just making them worse, like it's so hard to face that and admit it. And if you say that, if you say other practitioners are doing it, it puts you at risk of getting excommunicated from the professional community. You could lose your license as a therapist if you challenge this too much. So people keep their heads down when they see something different. Now, it would be one thing if orthodoxy really did represent what was proven to result in healing. And some notable missteps For example, the decades we were told that depression was a chemical imbalance and it could be treated with a pill that corrected the chemical balance. And it turns out neither of those two premises are true, that antidepressants and other drugs are used to treat things often successfully, but probably not at the rate that they're prescribed. Probably not. In case you didn't know that, it's not, the chemical imbalance theory was way overblown. A lot of times depression is other things, which is common sense. Common sense. I keep coming back to this. And so the common missteps are usually not publicly trotted out. They're discussed on the fringe. They're discussed in the underground. They're considered conspiracy theories, but especially in mental health. The data are very inconsistent. The transparency on what works and doesn't work is not great. And there's literally no system to find out, like, who's a good therapist. That is such a platitude. You know what you need? You need a really good therapist, or you just didn't really have the right therapist. When do you really need to talk to a doctor? And when do you really need to go to a therapist? And so what do you need? You need discernment. And how do you get discernment? Whether you have access to therapy or not, you learn to re-regulate and you learn moral principles of right and wrong. And now you are equipped to start making some judgments about whether somebody is a fit for you to help you on one of the most personal and vulnerable services that a person can provide to help you with therapy. And yet it's talked about, therapy, like it's the end all be all. It always knows the answer, and it's the only thing that does know the answer. So I'm challenging that. I'm challenging that with respect and love. I am personally friends with and acquainted with so many incredible gifted therapists. And that's kind of what the research has been showing. There's different modalities, and in the end, their outcomes are not that different. The thing where there is a difference is in the talents and abilities of the practitioner themselves, their attunement, their charisma, their ability to listen, their warmth. Those are the things that can make a difference for a person in the outcome. And what we're talking about there are human qualities. More and more therapists, thank goodness, are using alternative methods of supporting people that don't require you. It's not all based on the sad story of what happened. I mean, for me, that's just amazing. I still can't do that. But change takes a long time. And most therapists, even though they say they're trauma-informed, are still going to encourage you to talk about what happened week after week. And if that starts to dysregulate you, you get to call it out. And I guess the belief is that a breakthrough will come from talking. If you just talk long enough or go deep enough, that depth, stuff getting heavy, that's going to be more helpful. Or you're going to get insight or something. None of that stuff happened for me. So I don't mean to be dismissive, because some people it has worked for. So there's no measurement, though, of success. There's no transparency of which providers get results, better than others. So everything happens in a private room, in a conversation. How would you even know if the conversation that you had was off track or wasn't the best one you could have had, right? How would you know if you were misdiagnosed? I hear from people all the time where they spent years with a misdiagnosis because one practitioner was just sort of dead set on going, no, you are bipolar. That is what you have. And it turns out that wasn't it. Or what if there was a simple change that would completely release you from the depressed and anxious pit that you were stuck in, but you never got to hear about it? Because that's what happened to me. I heard about it by accident after years of therapy. And it turned out I was fine. I thought that I was somebody incapable of recovering, but it turns out I was capable of getting out of depression and dysregulation in about 2 weeks. I was better than I'd ever been. I had to leave therapy to access that. That's what happened. I mean, I think I learned it initially while I was in therapy, but therapy soon became, I don't think redundant is the right word. It just became irrelevant, where I'd go back in and be like, how are you feeling about the hard things? It's like, today I'm not thinking about the hard things. I'm pretty excited about some new thing that I'm doing. And the therapist is like, well, how'd that happen? I go, well, I'm doing this technique where I'm writing basically a prayer. I'm writing my talking to God about what's troubling me. And I'm asking for it to be removed and asking for guidance. And I remember the sort of which is, people where I live about prayer. That's like, uh-oh, somebody's gone loopy on this here. And, she put me in a cultural box or a mental health box that I had some sort of break with reality. She literally thought I had, because I thought that I was talking to God. Or I think she thought it is how she translated, I'm doing written prayer, and I'm feeling happier. and it's meaningful to me, and it's making me feel better, and it's giving me answers about what to do with my life to solve my problems, and things are getting better. And if that's not a measurement of success, I don't know what is, but it happened outside of our work together. And I had her disapproving vibe about it. I just had to leave to get out of that mental trap of what is supposed to make you happy, focus on pain, and give myself the space to focus on releasing all that and changing my life, of really taking responsibility in a way that maybe the therapist would have regarded as being too hard on myself, but it worked. And what I learned the hard way is that rehashing pain, for a lot of us who've lived through trauma, it's reactivation. It amps up your nervous system, which is firing away with cortisol and adrenaline and a racing heart, as if the trauma is still happening. And you may have been told all the emotional fireworks for progress or depth, and your hands shook and your body froze. But if you're like me, all it led to was brokenness. The more I talked, the more my nervous system stayed lit up. And the more angry or sad or freaked out I got, I couldn't feel my hands. I couldn't remember what I was there to work on. I'd be crying hard. And then that was all we had time for, and I had to go again. And believe it or not, I felt ashamed of how little I was improving. I thought I was some special kind of effed up person, and I gradually lost hope. I got dangerously hopeless, really. And it wasn't just this therapist, it was 10 others I'd seen before. It had always been like this. But everyone says, when you're struggling, you've got to go talk to someone. And I was going 3 times a week. And if talking about trauma was going to help me, it would have. But it was obvious I was only getting worse. So what saved my life wasn't talking about trauma. It was learning a technique that allowed me to express my thoughts and feelings in a way that didn't throw my nervous system into chaos. And that is something I teach, by the way, in a free course. You can learn it and try it in under an hour, and I'll put the link to that. It's called the Free Daily Practice Course, and it's in the top line of the description section below this video. The techniques give you a structured way to get your thoughts and feelings out in writing, and then you rest your mind in meditation for 20 minutes afterwards. It's crazy, right? Trust me, my therapist rolled her eyes when I told her a friend taught me a written prayer that made my depression lift and allowed me to have emotional calm and a completely focused mind for the first time in my life. She literally thought that I had had a break with reality when I stopped showing up emotionally shattered every Monday and Wednesday and Friday. She tried to reframe what I was doing as journaling and mindfulness, in fact, which it most emphatically is not journaling and not mindfulness. It's not the same thing. Those are fine things. To this day, people who want to challenge the legitimacy of what I'm doing use reframing as well. I don't like reframing. I know it can be used therapeutically, but it's done without your consent. It's just somebody, forcing their opinion on you in a very judgmental way, disguised as therapy. So when people do that, trying to explain myself to me in their terms, it's not respectful and it's not true. So it's something from their belief system. And it goes like this. It's like, so what you're saying is it's all about the breath. And I'm like, no, it's not about the breath. Where they go, basically what you're doing is reparenting yourself, right? And again, no, that's not what I'm doing. What I'm doing is praying, writing, meditating, and facing the actual problems of my life and owning that. And while I can consult with experts, in the end, it's on me to change my life. And I found a way to access that inner strength to do something that hard, because it's hard. And all that talk about what a shitty mother I had lost its usefulness like so long ago. The thing that needs healing is here. This is not radical. It's common sense. And I should tell you that thousands and thousands of clinical professionals not only share my methods with their clients and patients, but they use them themselves. This is not woo-woo magical thinking. It's a simple and drug-free and no-cost way to ease your stressed mind and relax your spirit and start feeling better, whether you have access to good professional help or not. What I do offer to people looking for therapy is a link to BetterHelp. You've probably heard of it. Some people complain about it, but honestly, it's kind of a miracle that there's this one system where you can always get in and get help. It's online therapy. It's not that expensive as therapy goes. And when the chips are down and you need professional help, this is a very accessible way to get it quickly. So I have an arrangement with them where you get 10% off if you use the link they gave me. It's betterhelp.com/CCF. I'll put that down in the description section too. If you want to click on that and get your 10% off, it's a good deal. When I finally set my mind to changing the way that I kept falling down, everything changed. So after 31 years of healing trauma in myself, I am not keeping quiet anymore. Talking about what happened to me only got me so far, and many of you are going to be the same way. You're going to need to know how to re-regulate. And I did. I wrote a whole book about that. I don't know if you know that. I don't talk about it enough here. Re-regulated. There's always a link down in the description section for that too. You need to learn how to re-regulate. And if you're serious about changing your life after trauma, and this is whether you go for therapy or coaching, or you talk to a friend, or you're working with a 12-step sponsor, please listen to this. Trauma goes hand in hand with moral chaos. So seek moral guidance from people who have a stable life, because trauma damages your ability to discern right from wrong. You'll hear a lot of opinions on this, but it's not old-fashioned. It's the basis of a good life. So seek help from people whose values you admire, whose lives are the sort of life you would like to have, and who are not afraid to give you feedback when you're making a mistake or falling down the same old hole. This is not being judgmental. I think that's why many therapists stay away from moral issues. They don't want to be judgmental. They really want to put forward the idea that you're accepted no matter what. And I appreciate that. But in mentoring, maybe you can't do that in therapy so much. But in coaching, mentoring, and sponsoring, you certainly can if the person is asking for it. And I encourage you to only work with people that you trust to guide you in that way. This is part of the healing that takes practice and discipline. Too many people are sitting in rooms, telling and retelling their stories, building an identity as a trauma survivor. They are very, very in touch with what happened to them, but not so in touch with where they're going and how the transformation can possibly take place for them to get from where they are to where they want to be. So thinking that, that's healing when really trauma-driven behaviors are keeping them brain fogged and worn out and wondering why things are not getting better. So if that's happening to you, it may be time to stop looking for answers in your past. You've talked about it enough, perhaps, and rise up instead into the power that you hold right here, right now, today, in this precious life of yours. If you like this video, I've got one that you're going to love right here, and I'll see you very soon. It's hard to perceive accurately what's going on in those moments. Like, what just happened? What's the actual problem? Is it me? Is it the other person? What am I supposed to say?